Hello everyone, you're welcome to my channel. You're welcome to Decenstitch. If you're a new subscriber or returning subscriber, you're welcome. Please kindly like, share, comment, subscribe. Please subscribe and click the notification bell. Thank you. I have a detailed video on how to make a straight skirt. So I'll be using this straight skirt. This is the center of the skirt, and I've cut it on fold. You have to cut it on fold because the ruching is by the side. So what I will do now is to reduce the length of this skirt. This is a pattern with a long length. I'll reduce the length and make it below the knee, 3 inches below the knee. Then I'll add my hem allowance. Like I said, this is a pattern. It already has all the same allowances needed. The reason for using 1 inch hem allowance is because I'm going to have a curve here. At the end of the ruching, there is a curve. So 1 inch will be easier to use to tidy the curve, folding 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to cut it out. I'm going to use this to get the length of the string I'll be using to gather the fabric to form the ruching. I'm going to be using 2 inches width. I'll label this as the string. This is 2 inches width and the length is the length of the skirt from waist to the knee, below the knee. I'm going to cut 2 pieces of this. Now I'm going to cut a band, which I'm going to use to make the casing for the strings to pass through. I'll be using 2.5 inches as the width for the band. I'll label it as the band, and I'm going to cut just 1 piece of this. Now I'm going to fold this place that I have the dart. That is where I want my ruching to be. So I'm going to fold it this way. And give it a curve. I'll be using the knee length. The curve ends at the knee length. This is what it looks like. For this front piece, I won't be using a dart. So I'm going to take the 2 darts out by the sides. The size of the dart is 1 inch. So I'll take it out by the sides 1 inch. I'll connect it back to the hip using the curve. I'll do the same for this side. Then cut it out. After removing the darts, The band, I'm going to fold it ½ inch on this side and ½ inch on this side. Then place it here where I made the curve and sew it down. I'm placing it on the wrong side of the fabric. This is the right side of the fabric. So I'll stitch it down on the edge on this side and on the edge on the other side too. After stitching it down on both sides, I will then stitch it down at the center of the band so I can have two casing. Right now this is one casing. I need two to pass my two strings. So I'll sew it at the center again all the way down. I've gone ahead to cut the skirt on the fabric. I'm going to place the band on this crease this way. This is the wrong side of the fabric, while this is the right side of the fabric. I'm placing it on the wrong side and I'm going to sew it on the edge on this side and sew it on the edge on this other side. I'll cut off the remaining excess. After sewing it on both edges, I'll then sew it at the center as I explained earlier, so I can have two casing to pass my two strings. I've made my two strings. I'm going to use them to gather this fabric to make the ruching. After stitching it down, I have this side and this side to pass my string. So this is the wrong side of the fabric, while this is the right side of the fabric. This is the right side and this is the wrong side of the fabric. The next thing is to pass my strings. I'll be using a safety pin to pass the two all the way down. I decided to start from the hem of the skirt all the way to the waist area, but you can do it whichever way. I'm done with this side. I'm going to use a pin to hold it so it won't go back inside. Then remove my safety pin and pick the second string and pass it. I'm done with the second side. I'll remove the safety pin again and pin it down. Then what I'll do next is to stitch and close the two casing here. Then I'll go ahead to draw the two strings. Make sure your strings are tiny enough to pass through whatever casing you are making. After drawing it, this is what the ruching looks like, and this is my opening. This can now be joined to the back piece. This is a simple method. I'll draw a line from the center of the dart straight down. I won't be using my dart like I said earlier. So I'm going to slash it here. When cutting on the fabric, I already have seam allowances on this. This is a pattern, by the way, but I don't have my seam allowance for this place. Here I'm going to add 1 inch seam allowance on this side, and I'll add 1 inch seam allowance on this side when cutting it on the fabric. I'm adding 1 inch all the way. I'll stop at the M. That 1 inch I'm adding is what I'm going to use to join these two together. So I'm going to sew here 1 inch. Let's assume this is the fabric and I've added my 1 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew 1 inch here all the way to the knee area. That's at the beginning of the curve. I'm going to sew it all the way to that side. I'll pin it down 1 inch. I'm assuming I'm sewing this 1 inch by pinning it down. So I'll pin it down all the way to the knee line, knee area. That is where you sew it to. After sewing the 1 inch, I'll flip it open this way and press it down with my iron. After pressing, I'll fold the edge. I'll use 0.25 inch. I'll fold it down all the way to the knee area. I can cut it when I get to the knee line. I cut it, then I'll sew it on the edge. I'm trying to make a small casing here, which I'm going to pass the string. I'll do the same on this side. I'll fold it by 0.25 and sew it on the edge all the way down to the knee line or the beginning of the curve. I'll give it a notch at the knee line here to separate it from the curve. Then I'll stitch it down here. Now I have these two down and I have the space to pass my string on this side and on this side. So this is how the back of the fabric will be. This is the front of the fabric. You're cutting 2 pieces of the string. So you're going to sew down the string to be tiny. There are 2 ways. You either fold it into 2 this way. You fold it into 2 first. There are 2 methods to make your string. After folding into 2, you sew 0.5 here. After that, you trim the seam allowance down a bit, then you turn it out. That's one method. The second method is to fold the edges in 0.5 on both sides, as if you're making a bias. You fold the edges all the way down, then you fold it again, so that makes it tiny. Then you stitch it down on the edge. This one you don't need to try to turn it out, just stitch it on the edge. It becomes a tiny string. which you're going to pass through these two openings. Use your safety pin to pass it. As you can see, it's entering inside. Don't make your casing 0.5, make it a little more than 0.5. That is why we folded 0.25, so we can have about 0.75 left for the casing, so that the string can pass through. You are cutting 2 pieces of the string. You make the second one and pass it through the second casing. I'll show you on fabric. I've gone ahead to sew down the 1-inch seam allowance. I've joined the 2 pieces. After joining, I sewed it down on the edge. This seam allowance, I flip it to this side, folded the edge 0.25, then sewed it down. This other seam allowance, I flipped it to this side, the opposite side, folded the edge 0.25 and sewed it the way I showed on paper. This is the back and this is the front of the fabric. So I'm going to pass my 2 strings through the 2 casing using the safety pin, the same way I did the first method, and draw the strings the way I did to the other one. This is the second method, the one with slits. After gathering it, it should look like this one. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please kindly like, share, comment, subscribe if you're new here, and click the notification bell. Thank you.